It's the Locked On Flyers podcast for Monday, April 8th. Your daily dose of Flyers news, analysis, and high quality content. Is wondering if this season is going to go out with a whimper instead of a bang.
Yeah, there's no more waves in the ocean, I don't think.
You're Locked On Flyers, your daily podcast on the Philadelphia Flyers. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hey there, and thanks for making Locked On Flyers your first listen every day. I am Rachel Donner. You can find me on Twitter at rmiriam. I'm here as always with Russ Cohen, who's on all your favorite social media apps at Sportsology. We are at Locked On Flyers on Twitter, Instagram, Threads, and Blue Sky as well. Today's episode is brought to you by Sleeper. Download the Sleeper app, use the promo code LOCKEDONNHL to get up to a $100 match on your first deposit. Terms and conditions apply. See Sleeper's terms of use for details. You can find us over on YouTube or on the SiriusXM app or anywhere you listen to podcasts. Subscribe to get our latest episode as soon as it's available here on the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. We have a tough pair of games to talk about on today's show. Losses to the Buffalo Sabres and Columbus Blue Jackets. The Nemesis of the week will also be a little bit later in the show, and they are getting more existential by the week. So apologies if it feels like I'm getting a little heady here, but I think this season kind of warrants it. One other thing that this season has warranted is Sean Couturier becoming the Flyers nominee for the Bill Masterton trophy this year. Russ, this is an award that is voted on by the Philadelphia chapter of the Professional Hockey Writers Association, of which you are a member. So talk about that aspect of it and the responsibility of this vote and what it means to have Sean Couturier as the Flyers nominee.
Yeah, I couldn't think of anybody else that was more deserving. He was my number one. I think it's rare, and I can't remember too many times where you have a unanimous decision in a chapter like that. I don't think it's ever happened in Philly, at least as long as I've been around. I just can't remember that. As for Flyers awards, yes, but for the Masterton, nominee, no.
Mm-hmm.
And I included Couturier in my big one too for the league, but I can't say what order or whatever. But he is in there.
Right.
So
yeah,
that's how strongly I felt about it because I know. Look, I had that. There was that press conference with, I think it was with Danny Briere late in the season, and Couturier was just, sort of getting in his last skate, and that was about a year ago. And I knew I was watching that, and it was a little melancholy as I was watching this press conference, watching that, knowing that, boy, this guy's just fighting to get back. So he really does exemplify perseverance. It's not supposed to be an award for just, who comes back from injury. You don't want it to be
right.
that. But, for perseverance, for everything else, for finally getting the captaincy, which he deserved, all of that. Yeah, he was a no-brainer.
Yeah, absolutely. If I had had a vote, it would have been Sean Couturier as well. Yeah, and I do think, like, given everything, even though he's hurt right now, and maybe the wear and tear he's had this season, I just think coming back to the level that he has, and like you said, becoming captain is just so meaningful. There have been a few Flyers, actually 4, to win the Bill Masterton over the history of the trophy. Bobby Clarke was the first Flyer to win it because he, was one of the earliest professional athletes with diabetes to be successful to the level that he was. And
I remember reading in, I think, Sports Illustrated that back then he was drinking like X amount of cans of Coke before a game, and that's the best technology they had back then,
Right.
Or take a lifesaver, so it's like, yeah, I was pretty amazed at that. Even though I didn't like him as a player because I grew up a Ranger fan, I was like, wow, how's this guy doing it? Like, I was really super impressed.
Yeah, and Tim Kerr won the award as well. He had come back from injuries. I forgot he had meningitis as well,
Yeah.
back then, and in terms of,
Which
why.
again, I mean, that's a hard
Like,
thing to come back from, man.
yeah, absolutely. And
That
then, of
saps
course,
your strength.
Ian LePerriere won the award. Famously got hit in the face twice with
Yeah,
a
he
puck.
ate some pucks.
Yeah, and then, most recently, Oscar Lindblom, was given the award as well. It's not an award that you
Although I gotta
necessarily.
tell you, honorable mention to Patrick Thoresen, who took a shot you know where in the playoffs and lived to talk about it. I mean, that was bad.
Fair enough, fair enough. But, yeah, this is an award that you don't necessarily want to win, but it probably
No,
feels
players do
good.
want to win it, actually. That's the
Well,
funny
it
thing.
probably does feel good, like,
Yes, it's an accomplishment.
yeah,
I've
you just
interviewed some.
don't wanna go through what you have to in order to get
Right,
there.
right. But I've gone through, I've talked to a couple of big players that enjoyed the fact that they won that award.
Yeah, of course. Like, once you get to the other side and win the
Yeah,
award, I'm
yeah.
sure it feels really good, but, yeah, because like last year, Chris Letang won it, well deserved.
He could win it every year. I mean, it's
Yeah,
unbelievable. I mean,
honestly, honestly. All right, been putting it off long enough, waxing poetic about Sean Couturier and Flyers of the past, but a tough back-to-back this weekend against the Sabres and Blue Jackets, falling in both games. And I'm just wondering, Russ, just big picture, like, do you think that one game was better than the other? Or they different kinds of losses? Like, how did you feel about each game?
well, I mean, I think there were different kinds of losses because even though I think it's a crutch, at least with the Sabres game, you could point to some advanced stats that pointed pretty
Right.
well. And, Torch tried to mention that after the game. And my feeling about that. I do think it's a crutch if you really lose the game and can't finish. And,
Right.
can't finishing is obviously a big thing for this team right now. And so, but in a way, was it better? Sure. Was it better for, the goaltending? No. Um, but it was better from at least a team standpoint. The Columbus game, there's just nothing redeeming. I mean,
Well,
yeah,
there's one thing redeeming,
yeah, I
but
know, and that's good. If you're going to say the Lixell and
and Jennings getting their
Jimmy
first
goals,
NHL
yes,
goals.
but there was from a team perspective, nothing redeeming. They really, they really didn't show up. They didn't,
Yeah.
and
Yeah. It's really, like, frustrating is the word, I think, because, you hinted at a bunch of things, and yes, it is infuriating to me that both those guys got their first NHL goals in such a terrible game because
yeah,
you wanna look back on it
'cause they
with
can't feel
positive
happy about it.
thoughts.
Like at least with the
Yeah,
media, they can't.
right, right, because, there's no I in team.
And Lixell has
So
worked hard for that goal, harder than
oh,
because he's had some great chances that just haven't gone in.
right, and I will say I do wanna give the other guys that were on the ice with both of them a lot of credit, given the poor circumstances of the game. They all took the time to
Yeah,
congratulate those guys.
no, and that's
I saw
great.
Cam Atkinson with a huge smile on his face, when Lixell scored. I think that's so important, and I do
Yes,
appreciate the guys for being supportive in that way. But you hinted at a bunch of themes here in your assessment of these games that are spot on. The first one I want to talk about is the lack of finish because this has gotten them on and off all season long, and I think that right now I'm wavering because is it the shooting or is it the goalies and the opposing teams doing their homework on the Flyers? I think it's a little of both, but I do think the onus has been on the Flyers and it's not there to improve on that front to at least give themselves a fighting chance.
right. I mean, I could talk about a shooting coach till I'm blue in the face. So I'm going to just move that aside. I still believe they need that, but um, I'm tired of hearing the phrase they got goalie because I'm going to say 7 times out of 10 you're going up against goalies that are only going to give you 1 or 2 goals. So most of the times you could say you got goalied in almost any game. So and look, Ukko-Pekka Luukkonen did play a really good game.
Fantastic game.
No question about it. He played a great game. I wasn't going to take it away from him. But my whole thing is you didn't make the most of your chances. And that's, again, just a theme of things. Um, whether it's going to the dirty areas, whether it's getting a goalie moving, whether it's, like as an example, in that Islander game against the Flyers, they came out with a strategy for Todorov after that one period. They were like, "All right, we got to get this guy moving. We got to pass it more. We got." The Flyers don't do that. Maybe one or two shifts they do, but they don't come out with like a strategy like, "Hey, this is how we're going to beat this guy today." Like, yeah, you could face an unknown goalie, but there are ways to beat goalies that you don't have a book on. There's no real excuse there. So I don't know. I look at it and I say, yes, it came up hollow. They came up short. I understand that these guys have been, rode harder than they should be, and this is the result because I mentioned it to, people that I've spoken to, that I work with like 2 weeks ago. I sent an email saying I felt like this was the path this team was on. And for me, it was easy to see because I've covered John so long. And so, yes, if you want to say would it have helped with having Sean Walker? Sure. But he wasn't going to score all these goals for you. Was it going to help if
No.
you had Sean Walker? Yeah, he would keep the score down a little bit, but he wasn't going to help all the goaltending. He wasn't going to not take dumb penalties. Like it's a team effort. You could lose a guy, but again, look at the Penguins losing Jake Gensel. Now their talent level's higher, but they were in much worse shape.
Yeah, well, there's a lot more to talk about with these couple of games, including goaltending, including the blue line decisions that were made, and I want to get into more of that coming up next. The season is in the home stretch, Flyers fans, and I want to remind you that you could still win big by playing daily fantasy hockey on Sleeper, the official daily fantasy app of Locked On NHL Network. Sleeper is our number one choice for daily fantasy sports and especially daily fantasy hockey, because with Sleeper, you can win 100 times your cash in daily fantasy hockey contests. Fans can also play daily fantasy NFL, NBA, MLB, and college football, and entries can be made in under a minute. All you have to do is pick whether NHL superstars like Connor McDavid, Nikita Kucherov, or Nathan McKinnon, or a Flyers standout like Travis Konechny will record more or less than their sleeper projections for things like goals, assists, saves, plus minus, and more in any given game. To win 100 times bet on Sleeper, you have to correctly predict the outcome of 8 player stats. You heard me, Flyers fans. You can win 100 times your money playing daily fantasy hockey with Sleeper. So start paying attention, nail those picks so you can start winning big. Use the promo code LOCKEDONNHL and you'll get up to $100 match on your first deposit. Terms and conditions apply. That's code LOCKEDONNHL. See Sleeper's terms of use for details and locational availability. Are you watching sports on cable TV all day? Have to turn down the volume with all that shouting? Make the switch to Locked On Sports today. It's a free 24/7 sports streaming channel program for you every day to bring you the biggest stories without all the screaming. Locked On Sports Today brings you can't miss analysis, opinions, and news streaming 24/7 on YouTube or the free Amazon Fire TV channels app, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Tomorrow on the show, we'll be talking Phantoms. We'll be talking Flyers versus Canadiens. And later in the week, we'll have our usual mailbag segment. So get those questions in. You can email us at lockedonflyers@gmail.com. You can send us a message on Twitter or comment on our YouTube channel. So, Russ, the goaltending. I think it's been kind of this looming cloud right now with
Yeah.
the Flyers. And I looked up since March 1st, the Flyers have the third most goals against in the NHL at 5-on-5, which is not good.
No.
We've seen sort of the upheaval of the goaltending situation this season. It's certainly been a point to look at in terms of the fortunes of the team going up and down. I think that, it's been a risky aspect to this season, especially, the decision to go with Fedotov, and, just send Sandstrom back down. We tried Cal Peterson, but we put a big burden on Sam Ersson
Yeah.
all at once. And Bush said on the broadcast in the Columbus game that the Flyers goalies could be affected, with a lack of action because of how good the Flyers D has been. And especially I would say more so in that Sabres game, right? Who they, with the goalie being cold and less likely to come up with big saves. But I
I'm
just
not
like,
buying it. I'm sorry. I respect
I
buying it.
know.
It's an excuse. We've seen goalies
Yeah.
not face a shot for 10 minutes and make big saves too, right?
Yeah.
Like, come on.
Yeah. And I think that, we cannot overlook, and without putting blame on any of these guys. I mean, it is a, like, no pun intended, tall order for Ivan Fedotov to begin his NHL career
Oh, it
under these
was ridiculous.
circumstances.
The way that they put him in was ridiculous in my estimation. And for a lot of reasons. I had said that from the beginning. But that was the road they wanted to go on. So, okay. Um, they're at a spot though. And nobody's still talking about the mental part of
Yeah.
Ursan maybe looking over his shoulder because there's another goalie in there. Nobody wants to talk about that or even broach that. But again, we've talked about it because there's a human aspect here. Getting past that, next year, like Kolosov needs to be in Lehigh and he needs to be the number one guy there and he needs to be there for a while. You can't just plug and play goalies from the KHL and the NHL and
No.
expect big results. If you want to make Fedotov your backup, that's fine. We don't even know if Sam Ursan is a true number one. I don't think he is. I think at best he's a 1A. And so, like next year, they're going to find out just what they have, even in all of their goaltending, right? So
Yeah.
that's going to be a seeking kind of mission for the year.
Absolutely. And I think this goaltending situation that the Flyers have truly warrants a full camp, a full evaluation period, a
Yes.
full, like, education period
Oh, yeah.
for figuring out what system is going to work overall for the Flyers next year and have the goalies worked into that system. Like, this is just so, like, I
This
just
was
feel like
chaos.
yeah, and I just feel like it's more like a race car running into a brick wall. Like,
Yeah.
it's just like, and I just feel for both these guys tremendously. I feel for Felix Sandstrom. I feel for Cal Peterson. Nobody is in a good situation here, and I don't blame them. But this has definitely affected the results we've seen.
Yeah, no question. I think they have to have a better strategy. Look, circumstances sometimes do have things become chaotic. I get it. Okay. But in the end, you got 1 point from Fedotov that if you're telling me Sandstrom couldn't have gotten, I'll tell you, okay, maybe you're right, but what's the difference? If they don't make the playoffs anyhow, what is the actual difference? You could have just
Yeah.
had Fedotov go down to Lehigh and play with Kolosov down there and let them split the rest of the season. Cal Peterson doesn't need to play again. Like,
Nope.
it doesn't serve the purpose of the organization down the line. So again, they have to start again. My big thing is this. You have to now turn the page unless teams lose are losing out here and you're still in this. You've got to turn the page even during this season and just play all the young guys in all different spots. You need to find out exactly what because there were things that have been not stepped over, missed, not used, missed opportunities, all that this year, like Tanner Lisinski getting NHL time, like a bunch of guys. I mean, Lisinski's doing great
Well,
now.
we can't
No,
call him
I
up
know
because
that,
there's
but they could have, is my point, and they didn't. They made a choice. So they made a choice, and now Danny Briere needs to, sit down with John and say, hey, here's the thing about this run. It was great. We got this, we got that. But next year, I'm not making any big moves. I'm trying to move out contracts. We're going to get even younger. And if you want to be a part of that, that's great. And let Torts make the decision because he's not getting any younger. And maybe he'll want to have a different role in the organization, or maybe he will want to do it. But the point is, they have to do it. You can't, they're not going to be better next year or closer to the playoffs next year than they were this year. Odds are very much against it. And I know people could say, well, it was against it this year. Great. But it's going to be more against it next year based on who's there, who isn't there, contracts, and everything else. You have to look at that.
yeah. And I wanna touch on something, that you mentioned just in terms of getting the young guys ice time, because that was, like, one of the other main things I wanted to talk about here is the blue line decision making that happened this weekend with putting Stahl and Johnson in the Buffalo game. They did switch it over to Adern and Ginning in the Columbus
Of
game.
course they did because John tried to go down with the ship with those two vets, and instead you had a good thing going and you broke it up. And you weren't going to get instant magic by putting them back together again. They needed to play. We talked about this though. They needed to build cohesiveness at the NHL level, playing
Right.
just those two guys together, and they were getting very good results. And he broke that up.
Right, and that was the issue for me. Now, I did see, Adder got beat, Jennings didn't, he made mistakes, but that's fine.
Right.
Like, I don't have any issue with them making mistakes. We saw Jennings, got his first goal, we talked
Yeah.
about as well. I think, Adder had some really good, like, shooting chances, as well, and he takes the shots as we've talked about
Oh yeah.
in the past, and I just, like, why waste that game in Buffalo with Stahl and
Right.
Johnson? Like, that was infuriating to me. And like, cause you put one of those guys out or the other, if at all, but never
Right.
both. Like that just seems like 101 hockey to me
It
in
made no
terms of,
sense, and I saw
yeah,
shortcomings, and they were matching up against Stahl, like, they knew. They knew they
yeah.
were going wide, they were actually spreading out the play, and look, I just don't feel like they were even all that well prepared as a group defensively. Like, they had their active sticks going, sure, but what I'm saying
Mhm.
is, we said, "Watch out for Quinn, watch out for Tage Thompson," and they both still killed them.
Yeah, and I think the other issue too that we've alluded to is, with Sealer and Drysdale coming back from injury, they're not 100%.
No.
And they're sort of having to reintegrate into what the team was doing during that gauntlet,
Right.
right? Which was like a different mindset because it was a different lineup. And
Mhm.
so I think there's just been a little bit of um just disheveledness to the blue line.
Disheveled is a good term, actually, because
And it's nobody's fault because there's an adjustment period,
except the
but
power play, there is somebody's
except the
fault for
power
that.
play. Yes, that is an exception, but I'm just saying as
I
5
know.
on 5 on the blue
Yes.
line, because, like, I thought Jamie Drysdale looked really, really good individually in that Buffalo
Yeah.
game, but he was out of sync with the rest of the team. You would see, like,
Right.
missed connections, like, he would, like, wanna drop pass it to somebody, he would skate up and wanna drop pass it to a trailing forward or the other
Yeah.
and they were out of sync. So, it's just like getting back in sync, it would take time, and so, yeah, I think that, that's just a circumstantial thing. There's nothing that they could do about it, but at the same time, it led to some, mixed results on the blue line.
Yeah. I mean, and look, frustration crept in with Travis Konecny. That was obvious. And, a lot of guys are frustrated. I mean,
Yeah.
it's gotten to the point where Owen Tippett's invisible on the power play. How's that
Yeah.
possible with the shot he has? Like,
I
it's
know.
just, some of these things are just, you shake your head. You're like, and they have to get fixed because these guys are your future pieces. You've got to present them in a better way. So they have to really look at redoing a lot of those things because it's not going to be about them just coming up a few points short for the playoffs. There are other real reasons why they didn't make it. And, losing Walker wasn't really it. If I was going to name the one reason, it's the power play because I can look every
Yep.
game that they go 0 for 2, 0 for 3, 1 for 4, and they're just giving up chances to actually get on the board with that.
Yep, and, that 4-minute double minor to start the Columbus game
Yeah.
essentially was indicative of everything that we have gone through on that front, but, we know where the team is out of the playoff picture. We'll get more into it tomorrow when we preview the Montreal game, and see what the circumstances are at that point, but it is Monday, and we have our nemesis of the week. We will get to that coming up next.
Passion, drive, and patience. The formula for winning championships is also what keeps your ride or die alive. eBay Motors has everything you need to maintain your vehicle and level it up to peak performance. Superchargers, roof racks, exhaust kits, LED headlights, and more. Whether you're into speed, power, or style, eBay Motors has you covered with over 122 million parts for your number one ride or die. You'll always find exactly what you're looking for, and with eBay Guaranteed Fit, your part is guaranteed to fit your ride every time or your money back. Because with eBay Motors, you're burning rubber, not cash. With all the parts you need at the prices you want, it's easy to make your car the MVP and bring home the huge wins. Keep your ride or die alive at ebaymotors.com. Eligible items only, exclusions apply, eBay guaranteed fit, only available to U.S. customers.
So, Russ, last week on the show, I talked about my nemesis being, getting fresh legs, and how do we get there in terms of, going into the home stretch, with a fresh perspective and getting, younger legs and the prospects out there more. We literally just talked about that in the last segment about how they kind of mismanaged that a little bit, but Eddard and Ginning did get some opportunities over the last week overall, so that was good. This week, the Flyers face the Montreal Canadiens, the New York Rangers, and the New Jersey Devils. So it's not going to be easy for them this week if they want to try and work their way back into a playoff position. I think that for me this week, the nemesis is, something we have been talking about a lot recently and on today's show, learning the lessons you need to and then moving forward with them,
Mhm.
right? Because I think at this point, you have to look at the day to day and next game and what are we going to do on a day to day basis, but you have to start thinking bigger picture right now. You have to think toward the future. You have to think toward this off season. And in order to do that, you have to learn lessons. You have to look at the bigger picture of this season and say, what have we learned? What's on our list of questions? All that stuff that you were just talking about, Russ, is extremely important for them to do. And if they're like hyper focused on this week's games, which they do need to do, don't get me wrong, but they
Yeah,
have to be able to walk and chew gum at the same time
right.
and be able to do both. And that's what I worry about this week is like, can they start doing both of these things at once?
Yeah, no, that's fair. Yeah, I've got a lot of different ones swimming around my head. I guess the biggest one I'm going to bring up is the playoff format. I had defended it for the last few years, but I think now it's just the way the teams are, the way the league is. I think this is the wrong format. It's basically awful, and a lot of good writers are pointing out why, as far as what the matchups. And I get it. The NHL wanted to have like first big matchups, first and second round, like this year as an example. You might get Ranger Islanders. You might get some rivalry stuff. Remember when the Flyers matched up with the Rangers first time in 10 years? Like I get it. There were some good moments for that, but now it's just like this league is so physically punishing that you are really taking out good teams too soon with this format. You just are. And it's going to happen again this year. And I just feel like it's got to change. So change it, NHL.
Yeah, I do like miss when it was just 1-8, two
Right.
seven.
Yep.
Like I think that it allows for more interesting matchups, I think, in the
It
big
does.
picture. And it creates more rivalries. Like the division rivalries are already mostly there. Let's create more. Let's
Yeah.
make every game more impactful in the regular season by encouraging these playoff matchups
Yeah.
that are, a little bit more widespread. I think that is definitely a point of contention. And I think that with any system, like whether it's the all-star game format, whether it's the draft,
It some
whether
reaches an endpoint.
yeah, there's just a lifespan of
Right.
formats and everything overtime rules, the 3-on-3
Right.
overtime,
Right.
everything reaches a point of becoming stale and you have to shake it up a little bit.
Yes.
There's nothing that's going to work for all of eternity. And you just have to recognize that, I think.
Yeah. I agree.
All right, that will do it for today's show. Like I said, on tomorrow's show, we will be talking Flyers versus Montreal. We are going to have Phantoms Tuesday, and there's another new guy signed by the Phantoms to a PTO and an AHL deal out of Nebraska, Omaha, that we're going to talk about, as well as their results and answer the question, did Kolosov check in? The answer is, as of now, no. But we will talk more about that and the plan with him on that show. As a reminder, we always want to hear from you. If you've got mailbag questions, you can send them in via Twitter at Locked On Flyers. You can email us at lockedonflyers@gmail or comment over on YouTube. I'm Rachel. I'm on Twitter at rmiriam. That's RMIRIAM.
I'm Russ. I'm at Sportsology, SPORTSOLOGY.
Locked On has launched the first ever national sports 24/7 streaming channel on YouTube that's also available on the Amazon Fire TV app in the free Fire TV channels. Locked On Sports Today is here for you 24/7, covering top sports stories of the day with local experts of Locked On, plus national shows covering every league like Locked On NHL. Find Locked On Sports Today available on the free Fire TV channels app. Have a great day, everyone.